Hello and welcome to the Ashcan Edition. I'm Brant Lewis. And tonight I'm calling you from the X Pit on the fiery planet of Apokolips. And let me tell you, it gets pretty hot here. Hopefully my guest can help me as she calls from her mother box on New Genesis. I'm very excited to be joined by Ngozi Ukazu, a great cartoonist you may know from Check Please, and more recently with her work with Jack Kirby's Fourth World with Barda and her upcoming graphic novel, Orion. Ngozi, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, I am so happy to be here. Brant, what got you thrown into the X pit?
Let me tell you, this is what happens when your dad makes deals to try to protect peace.
Okay, wow, you are the chosen one, or one of the chosen ones, I guess. I had no idea.
And I guess you're the other one.
Perhaps. We'll see. Maybe by the end of the interview, we will reveal our secret parentage.
Exactly. So to kind of get things started, I usually like to begin with a couple of little quick warm-up questions, kind of set the mood, help relax a bit.
That sounds great. I am already very relaxed.
Okay. So, if you're trapped on a deserted island and you can only bring one music album with you, what would it be and why?
I would bring the album that I'm currently listening to, which is something I know I might get tired of like 10 years from now, but I'm listening to the new Fontaine's DC album Romance. I first discovered it while I was working on Orion in a cafe in Soho, and I just have been addicted to it this summer and fall.
Very, very interesting. I'll definitely add that to my never ending music list. So, what's an underrated comic they feel that people have slept on?
An underrated comic, my go-to would be Girl Town by Casey Nowak. It won an Eisner back in like 2015, 16, 17. Casey Nowak, I always cite them as being such a like innovative, uh, different thinker. They're really good at bringing the um, I would say like the kind of off the wall thinking that you'd see in underground comics and mixing that with a more like accessible web comics aesthetic and then just grounding it in just solid cartooning. They wrote a short story called Diana's Electric Tongue that I still think is some of the best writing and world building that I've ever encountered in comics.
That sounds really cool. I again, I will add that to my never ending reading list. That's kind of thing. I'm just adding more and more stuff that's just slowly overtaking me at this point. So, what's the first comic they remember reading as a kid?
The first comic, I mean, we had those Garfield like reprints where they collected all the Sunday comic strips. I remember reading those. Uh, I would probably say those, but it's confusing because I also read a lot of comic strips, just like Spider Man and uh, not so much Family Circus, Zits. So maybe how about the first superhero comic that I remember reading very clearly? Oh, I'm trying to get the timeline of it. It might have been Quiver by Kevin Smith, uh, which was his run on the Green Arrow. Hmm. Or it could have been, if I go back deeper into the recesses of my mind, it might be the Ultimate Spider Man comics from the 2000s.
Those are so good. That's definitely Brian Michael Bendis at his peak, along with Mark Bagley at his peak. Like, it's just so good with that. I would also consider cartoon strips to count because I think
Okay.
that's I think for a lot of people, including myself, that is kind of our first exposure to the idea of sequential art, or at least the idea of a comic.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's now move on to the meat and potatoes. One of the pinnacles, I would say, of comics, if not the foundation, Jack Kirby, the man, the myth, who, without him, comics would not be what they are today.
Yeah.
So I know, based in previous interviews, you mentioned that your first exposure to Jack Kirby, specifically the New Gods and Fourth World, was in the Justice League Unlimited episode, The Ties That Bind, written by Mathis. So could you talk a little bit about what really piqued your interest into that section of the DC universe?
Yeah, it was, DeMatteis, writing, just really doing a good job of summarizing Scott Free and Barda, and kind of just doing this very crash course entry into the new gods for the uninitiated like myself. And I just remember just being really fascinated by this little pocket of the DC universe. I am a huge DC fan. I'm a DC head. I'm completely brainwashed. But for whatever reason, like the parts that get, let's say, picked over don't really appeal to me as the parts that seem a little bit more niche, a little bit more strange. And also there's just this incredible cohesion that comes from the fourth world that you don't get in other areas of the DC universe, I believe. And it's probably because it came from one person, the man, the myth, the legend, Jack Kirby. And just that cohesive world building is always something that draws me in.
Oh no, I fully agree with that. I think that was honestly what drew me to the Fourth World as well, is because there's really nothing else like it in comics, because it's like this space opera, this cosmic religious element. And I mean, especially with New Gods itself, and even with Mr. Miracle, it's like this weird mix of this grand intergalactic odyssey with gods, but also there's this aspect of a domestic drama built into it as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't know. Well, yeah, I think Jack Kirby just had that fascination with, he wanted to tell this story that was a cosmic opera, space opera, just a huge religious, like pseudo religious text, if not a purely religious text. And he did want to ground it on Earth. He wanted these characters to, man to interact with God. And I thought that that's something that when it comes to writing Barda and getting to write Orion, I feel like I actually don't delve into that as much. I feel like that is such a Herculean task. No pun intended with mentioning God there. It's so difficult to uh, like lay out this mythos and then also inject the human element into it. But that was just a testimony to Jack Kirby's ambition. And I mean, he did it. He did it. I love reading New Gods, and just like issue one, we're introduced to this random gang of middle Americans. Like there's an accountant, there's just some teenager, and yeah, these are Orion's disciples that we get introduced to in New Gods issue one. So yeah, I love how grounded it is.
Fully agree with that. And unfortunately, with this sad being video, the audience can't see this, but I do
Oh,
have New Gods issue one.
yo, I don't wanna flex on you, but I just bought New Gods issue one, and I won't even tell you what it's graded, man. I just got into this crazy comic book collecting. I won't tell you what it is. 'Cause I don't want people coming to my house try to take it from me. But yeah, it's a fun series to collect because you can catch them all, as they would say in Pokemon. So I'm with you. We should high five our New Gods issue ones when we see each other in person one day.
Truly, with that, I do think that's such a fascinating way of putting it as well, about they're almost Orion's disciples, the fact that he is explaining the world to them, because you have, and I do love that so much in issue two, the introduction of Darkseid, where he's just sitting in this chair in this apartment and he's not doing anything, but it's still like the scariest thing.
Have you seen that there's a Tumblr blog from a long time ago that was called Dark Side Chillin' on a Couch or Dark Side Chillin' on a Chair?
I have not, but that definitely sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, it's just like this weird thing, and I mean, like spoilers for Orion, the graphic novel I'm working on slash no spoilers because it's already like everyone knows what happens in Orion, but I just love that Darkseid, I think he's such a great villain because he's menacing because he's really relaxed. And he lets other people do his dirty work. I think in issue 2 that's when is it Brola, like the stone fist guy? He's like, "Oh yeah,
Yes.
no, I'm chilling in a chair, but you're going to I have someone who's going to take care of you, son, Orion." Um I could talk about Darkseid all day. I think he's a great villain who doesn't need a tragic backstory. And for whatever reason, he's just compelling because he is so certain that he should be in control of free will.
Yeah, no, and I think I definitely agree with that. I mean, the fact that that phrase "dark side is" just perfectly submits who he is as a character. The fact that he's more than just a being, he is this force, he is this
He's the
philosophical.
Tiger Force.
Exactly.
When you close your eyes, it's Darkseid that you see.
God, that's such a good line.
Yeah.
It, God, this feels like this episode could just be us quoting
No, I could quote
Dark Side.
I could quote specifically just Darkseid all day, and I low key like think Darkseid is also like kind of hilarious. He's kind of really funny. Like, I think after yeah, it's like probably in the next issue, New Gods issue 3, where he like kicks is it Desaad or Brola? He kicks someone for failing him. And it's so funny. He like kicks them in the butt and they fly towards the camera. And I'm like, this guy's so kooky. He's so stoic and he literally to punish people, he will just kick them in the butt. I'm like, or he'll vaporize them with an omega beam. So I like Darkseid has that range.
Yeah, no, and the fact that one of the worst events that could happen to him is the marriage of Scott and Barda. The fact that it's like this wedding could be the end of him, and the fact that it's like the way the Mr. Miracle ends with just him laughing is just like he
It's
doesn't need to do anything physical. His presence is enough.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole and we could probably have a whole podcast on each issue of each of the fourth world comics cuz yeah, the Barter wedding was pretty hilarious just hey, let's get the gang all in here. This is the first time Orion and Scott have ever met. Oh well, now here's Darkseid to mix things up. And yeah, it's just it's great when Darkseid shows up because I don't know he's just a scary guy and he has a
Yeah,
great sense of humor.
no, fully agree with that. That's been kind of my issue with a lot of modern takes on Dark Side is when he's a purely physical threat instead of that philosophical, almost energy vibe to him.
Yeah,
Because he
yeah,
does, because he doesn't need to physically attack you. He doesn't need to like physically fight you. The fact that his presence is enough.
yeah. I finished the script for Orion like 2 months ago, and I'm working on the thumbnails for now. And it's so interesting the amount of research that I had to do. Because literally, I think it's Jack Kirby and then Walt Simonson and then me. I have to write Orion just as he is, and writing Orion means you have to write Darkseid. Um, and it's a hefty task. It's huge because like I mean, I come from the world of boys love like a character. I've spent more time with a character named Eric Biddle who's like a baker and he's like, "Hi y'all, I love pies." And now I have to write Darkseid, who is the most evil character maybe in comics, like just maybe like what is it? Lawful evil. And yeah, he's not someone who is physically menacing. I mean, he's depicted in comics. He's usually not even that tall or wide. Um, and I think when we see him as a young character, like the Euxis, before he becomes Darkseid, Yeah, when we see him, I think we see him for the first time as like a young guy. Well, we see him for the first time ever in Jimmy Olsen, which don't get me started on Jimmy Olsen.
It's so much
Um,
fun.
Fun is a good way. That's a great way to refer to it. Fun. I demented. I think it's Jack Kirby going on like full cylinders.
It is.
He's like, oh yeah, no worry. I'm gonna take this worst selling comic series and make it the best by throwing everything at it. But when we first see like the young dark side, he's a very menacing, like cerebral. He's like a scientist, and that's I think that people forget that he's smart. He's like more like his uncle Steppenwolf is the brute guy. He's the warrior guy. Darkseid is the king. He's the general. He's cerebral, and writing him, it's been a balance of making sure that, like, I will try not to spoil the graphic novel that I'm currently working on, but it's really him just like always thinking at the top of his intelligence, always knowing uh Orion what he's going to do before he does it, and being really calm about it. He's very relaxed, and I love a villain who has a sense of humor, is relaxed about it, but also wants total universal domination.
Oh no, definitely with that. I think that just could only come from someone like Jack Kirby, especially with his own art and career, which is so very much political and based on his life
Yeah.
as a Jewish American growing up and then basically go to World War II and seeing fascism, totalitarianism, and then creating this ultimate god of those beliefs.
Yeah. No, 100%. It's interesting, uh, just reading so much about the fourth world and like why Orion and Scott are the heroes of the fourth world. You can argue that Orion is the main protagonist, but it's basically two answers to fascism. What do you do? How do you defeat it? And these two characters embody the different approaches, and you need both desperately. You need hope, you need resilience, you need that indefatigable spirit that Scott possesses. But at the same time, you also need just the righteous fury that cleanses evil. You need both, and some might argue that, well, I would even argue that, yeah, I tend to be more of a pacifist, but Jack Kirby makes this argument of like, actually the only way you can defeat raw fascism is righteous fury, which we'll see.
Yeah, and to clarify, we are recording this on November 5th, which honestly was that on purpose?
No, I literally was just like, "Oh, I'll be free on a Tuesday evening," and yeah, we'll see what happens. We are getting ballots in. They're doing counting. Hopefully, we will not need any righteous fury, uh, but we'll see.
We'll see with that. I mean, if we need to, we just look to Jack Kirby, the man who would fight, well, was about to fight a Nazi who called in complaining that Captain America punched Hitler.
Yeah, no, yeah, and that is why I will always be so excited to say that I work with Jack Kirby characters, because he is an artist and creator who would, without even thinking, just go and fight a Nazi. So
Yeah, have you read the Tom Scioli biographical comic about Jack Kirby?
I haven't.
It's really good. It's great. Goes into detail about his life, his career. And there's a bit about in World War II. He's like surrounded by a couple of Nazis, and after they insult his mother, he basically kills all of them with a knife.
That checks out. that
It
totally
does.
that totally checks out. And let's say I don't think Stanley could do that. So
No
that rock.
stand. I think in the background novel, the sequel, which is about Stanley, I think Stanley's mainly writing for the army and all that.
That's fine.
Yeah, which kind of tracks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool to I don't know, like, when I think about a character like Orion and I think about a character I just think about the fourth world. It's like, yeah, this is written by a guy who went to war and has, like, killed people. So I'm like, you have to bring that energy. You have to bring that just, kind of, like, honor and rawness to it. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. And what is an important skill that you feel they learned from Jack Kirby as a writer and an artist?
Well, this is coming secondhand, actually, the a little anecdote I'm gonna tell, but I was at a convention I was at Bedrock Comic Con in Houston, Texas, just last, month, and I got to talk to Dennis Cohen, one of the creators of Static Shock. Uh, Amazing. It was I was so annoying. I just kept whenever he had like a free moment, I just went up to him and just asked him a bunch of questions. He gave me a lot of homework, which is fantastic. But Dennis told me a story about when he got to meet Jack Kirby. Um I think it was right after DC uh I don't want to get any of the facts wrong, but basically his career had just totally blown up. Milestone Comics was huge. And Jack Kirby wanted to meet him, which is nuts. So he went up to Jack Kirby. He got, I think he was like smoking a cigar inside, of course. I don't know. I could be embellishing. Everyone asked Dennis
It
to tell me the
tracks.
story. But Jack Kirby shook his hand and just told him, write with power. He told him, write with power. And I was like, whoa, okay. Thanks for thanks for telling me that story, passing it from Jack Kirby to you to me. Write with power to say that to a young black guy in the 80s, 90s, whatever. Um Huge. I think he was I think I think what you see in Jack Kirby's work is this total freedom, this total authorial agency that anything that comes out of your pen is law. And it's funny because I approach his text with reverence, and it's my goal to um it's truly my goal to reintroduce all of this material to a younger audience. So I feel like I don't write with as much power as I could, but in my own work, I take that advice and I'm like, oh, I can literally do anything. I can do anything. Why not? So maybe I don't know. I feel like if I had the chance to meet Jack Kirby, I'd probably ask him like, "Okay, so where did the Astro harness come from?" And he'd be like, "Oh my god, shut up. Just write with power." But I feel I have a different assignments for this text.
Yeah, no, and I think you are writing with a different sense of power because with Jack Kirby, I think best way to describe it's like it's the equivalent of being hit by a truck. It's just
Yeah.
full force at you, and I think with your take, especially, it's a lot more. I don't want to say softer. It's a lot more emotional. I don't want to say even emotional because Jack Kirby's still emotional. I think you dive into really kind of like more of the subtlety of that power.
Yeah, it one thing I can say that I am hopefully an expert on. One thing I'm an expert on is the young adult genre. The young adult genre is internal. Um Hallmarks of a young adult book is how a character relates to their peers and to their parental figures and to the world. And it requires a lot more introspection than you would see in a typical superhero graphic novel, which is usually external. Usually it's plot driven. Usually it's about the central conflict between the hero and their antagonist. So even with Orion, I writing that now and kind of the work I did with Barda, it's soft is a good word, emotional is a good word. These are heroes who they have the boom and the pow and all the other great onomatopoeia, but they do have to have like an emotional engine to get us through the 187 pages or 192 pages for DC young adult graphic novel.
Oh, definitely. I think kind of go back to what you mentioned about the idea of like that ethereal freedom. And for me personally, that's was a huge draw to those characters. The idea of freedom, the idea of living life as yourself, and I find that just so beautiful in Kirby's work because there's such an unapologetic aspect of living your life, and I think especially come from Kirby at his time at that age where he is.
Yeah, he was in his 50s.
Exactly, he's in his 50s. Like the fact that he didn't become jaded by the youth and embraced it, and I think you definitely see that in New Gods, Mr. Miracle, and especially with
Forever
Forever
People is
People.
is a tribute to youth. It is so incredible that at 50 he was like, "No, this is the coolest thing right now. Biker gangs around my house are the coolest thing right now. I'm going to make a comic about these kids."
Yeah, and I think that's definitely why that work appealed to such a younger audience, and I'd say definitely a much different audience than the traditional big two comic reader at that time.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, and now talk a little bit about you and your work. Start off with Barda, which I really loved a lot. It was a great graphic novel.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Could you talk a little bit about what your original pitch was for Barda and what made you decide to pick her?
Yeah, it's so I'll tell you the whole story, which is I had worked on a 4-page anthology piece for Sam Humphries. Sam was finishing his Harley Quinn run. It was Harley Quinn number 75. And I got to draw 4 pages of his script. It was really exciting. It's my first published work with DC. And after that, there was this huge door open where I was like, you know what? There's this graphic novel line that DC has. I wonder if I could do a story. So we were linked with Michelle Wells. Me and my agent were linked. Like we were connected with Michelle Wells, who was running the entire DC Young Readers line at the time. And I pitched 3 stories. I pitched a, a fun story that honestly I'm still pretty passionate about, but I'm not sure if I ever will have the energy to actually write and draw it, where a young, ambitious journalist from Gotham gets a summer internship in Metropolis. She's so excited to work with Lois Lane. And on day one of the internship, she's at the Daily Planet, and she meets everybody at the Daily Planet and realizes that Lois Lane is not there and that she has been assigned to work with Clark Kent for her internship. And this is a Gotham girl. She does not like Superman. And she has to basically solve the problem, which is why do uh, residents of the Black community in Metropolis, why are they disappearing? What's happening? And of course, it's LexCorp, and they're snooping, and Jimmy Olsen's there. So I had that pitch, and then I had another pitch, which was maybe the worst pitch. I just wanted to write about Booster Gold and like social media. It was not a strong pitch, but I was like, Ted and Booster are my favorite superheroes. Can I pretty please write something about them? And then the third pitch was Barda. And we were talking with the man who would be my editor, Jim Chadwick, and he actually wanted the Metropolis story. He wanted the Daily Planet Junior Reporter story, and there was just something about that story that I knew it would take a lot out of me, and there was just something about Barda being that third pitch. I was like, I I think that Barda is just calling to me for some reason. It was a romance, it was a heist story, it would involve so much sci-fi, and we me and my agent, we we weren't contrarian, but we put our foot down. We were like, "You know what? Sorry we pitched you all those things. We actually just want to draw Barda. We just want to do Barda, and it's a little bit of a take it or leave it," which I don't know. I swear I'm not like a crazy person. I don't I would never go up to DC Comics and be like, well, and I would never go up to DC Comics and like neg them and do the, what is it called? Who's that guy who tries to like neg women by like saying what
Andrew
is it called?
Tate.
No, no. Good one though. The something artist, someone who's listening to this is like
Oh, it's the
screaming.
pickup artist. I can't
Yeah,
think
I
of.
would never
Yeah.
try to go up to DC and do the pickup artist to them, be like, actually, take it or leave it. But they came around and they were like, you know what? We have this fourth world content. Newer readers may not be as familiar with it. Let's do Barda. And it really was just the strength of the fourth world that I wanted to reimagine. And to be honest with you, kind of fill in some gaps. Jack Kirby having, I mean, basically being the writer, artist, and editor on the Fourth World stories, he does a tremendous amount of world building and lets you kind of fill in the gaps. But I wanted to kind of poke around in there and see what story beats we could actually stretch out. So yeah, like for example, the biggest motivation for pitching Orion was that we never actually see someone tell Orion that he is Darkseid's son. I think it's like the last pages of New Gods. He just kind of concludes it from his fight with Calabac, and I'm like, what? But there's so many comics where we see them like Orion fighting Darkseid. We all know Orion is Darkseid's son, but we never actually see him learn that fact and deal with the repercussions. So yeah, it's filling in the gaps. That's why I pitched Barda, and yeah, that's why I'm working on Orion.
I think that's a great way of putting it of filling in the gaps because after rereading Barda and then rereading Mr. Miracle, it just kind of amazed me in a way the way they were able to thread all those details in within outside the panels. I think especially one of the major ones is increasing. I'm gonna be mispronounced her name. Aro-
Oh, uh,
Auris.
I call her orally. It's interesting because fourth world characters have a history of not being pronounced correctly. So I try not to take it too seriously. Even Orion for a while was his people weren't saying his name correctly. They were calling him Orion, and the reason why Jack Kirby kind of creates the Orion gang, like O apostrophe Ryan gang, is to tell people how to say his name. So we don't know if orally is the way to say it, but that's what that's why I call her that.
Fair, and honestly, we can only do our best without Kirby, but I do think that is very interesting that you give her such a big role, especially playing motivation with
Yeah.
Barda, because I remember rereading Mr. Miracle, just see the panel of her with the boot, see the panel, see the stuff with her with Hyman, and the fact that, in a way, after reading Barda, I kind of filled in those gaps unknowingly before rereading Mr. Miracle, but like, wait, this wasn't in the comic?
Yeah. It's like all this stuff that I think Kirby trusts his readers to just figure it out. But I had the fun of actually thinking about how everything would work out.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely with that, and also too, I also kind of want to ask about what did you draw from outside of Kirby when working on Barda? Because obviously you have mythology, sci-fi, fantasy, and even I would say fairy tale aspects to the story.
Yeah. You know, it's that's a good question because I don't remember where some of those ideas even came from. Like why Barda has a book, and even though it's like the one of the main plot points of the story. Um, that is a good question. Probably should have written that down. I just remember coming up with that line, "We do not speak of love and apocalypse," and kind of going from there like, okay, well, if we don't speak of love, wouldn't it be amazing if a love story is what drives Barda to kind of realize that she's been brainwashed. Um, yeah, I remember like workshopping that fairy tale, having some of my friends from high school and college help me flesh it out. But I don't remember why I decided, oh, she should get a piece of like fairy tale propaganda. So that's a mystery to me, actually. Maybe I'll go through my notebook and find the place where I came up with that plot point.
Maybe so. It also just feels very character with telling a Jack Kirby story because so much of his work was influenced by all the bits and pieces that he picked up growing up and then essentially putting his own spin on it in that way.
Yeah.
And I do have to say, I think one of my favorite aspects of Barda was really building upon the Scott and Barda relationship, which I would say is probably my OTP in all of comics. I love them so much, and I do really enjoy the fact that you give both of them agency
Yeah.
in that aspect of their relationship. The fact that they don't need what it's not a one-sided type of aspect. The fact that they both need each other to survive, to escape, and I think that's just such a great thing because, in my opinion, they have one of the healthiest relationships in comics.
Yeah, they are as a romance, they are two characters that complete each other. Scott is so resilient and Barda is so protective that like they just balance each other out. Like Barda, brings a little bit more of that ferocity that Scott might be missing. Well, Scott is the one to kind of point out that Barda has like a softer, uh, like more emotional side. And just writing their escape and writing how Barda just completely falls for Scott. I think she just gets blown away by how someone like Barda knows she is tough, and then she meets Scott, and she realizes like, oh, there's another way you can be tough. It's not about being cruel. It's not about being strong. You can just have willpower. And seeing Barda attracted to that willpower and kindness, it's so fun to write. It's like because it's so fun writing her starting off as like a soldier and then just getting attracted to this willpower. So yeah.
Yeah, it very much calls to mind a panel that I think about all the time in the original Mr. Miracle of more than that, Barda, living or dead, you and I are proof to all of Apokolips that it can fall. And I think that's just such a great thing to portray the fact that we don't have to live essentially in this hellish environment. If we have each other, we will be
Yeah.
fine.
They truly found love in a hopeless place.
They truly, truly did with that. And I think another thing that I also really enjoyed was you tied into the idea of nature versus nurture, which is at the core of the fourth world. And in my opinion, Jack Kirby isn't favoring one or the other. He's very much saying, in a way, none of that really matters in your life as long as you make that effort to try and prove
Yeah.
to be better.
The great thesis of the fourth world is that nature versus nurture is an irrelevant argument. All that matters is that the fact that these characters have the free will and agency and tenacity to do good. And it's such a bold statement that I do think people miss. I think painting Orion as like someone who can't get past his savage nature, being the son of Darkseid, or even painting Scott as someone who is secretly broken because he grew up on Apokolips. It misses the point. It misses the point that Jack Kirby wrote about two characters from two completely different worlds, uh, being put in two completely different upbringings, but getting the same result, which is this dedication and like obsession with just kindness and justice. So um it's at the heart of New Gods in the Fourth World, and I think it becomes pretty apparent. Just probably, yeah, once you read through all the comics, yeah, I think people usually kind of pick up on that.
So what was the one? So what was, in your opinion, the one of the most challenging things about tackling Jack Kirby's work?
Hmm. Um it has such a clear point of view that it I find it I often say that if Jack Kirby were alive today, he'd be the greatest webcomic artist of all time. Like he'd make the next Homestuck. He just has that like web comics insanity where like he if you gave him like a tablet and access to Photoshop, who knows what would happen. And I think approaching I don't look at Jack Kirby. I don't look at the Fourth World as just another DC property. I look at it as a Jack Kirby property. So maintaining that voice is something that's important to me, while also delivering it in like this young adult bundle. It's there. I so far I'm writing Orion right now, and the challenges that I've run up against are just the things that Jack Kirby probably didn't think are important are things that are driving me insane. Like I mentioned this earlier in our interview, but like, where did the Astro harness come from? Simonson explains it as like, oh no, it's just energy. It's part of Orion, and I'm like, yeah, okay. I think that's the best explanation we have so far. I also think about the fact that when Orion and Scott were traded, they were like 6 or 7. So, not only do they probably remember like coming from different planets, like Scott was sedated when he was put through the little portal to go to Apokolips, but B, other people would remember that there were kids that were no longer there. That's like one of the biggest, I won't call it a plot hole, but I think about that all the time. How like suddenly there was like this. Imagine we were in World War IV. Like we're like super dystopia, and all of a sudden it stops, and we're like, wait a minute, what just happened? And why are Malia and Sasha Obama gone? Like no one sat there and just thought about it. And like, why is there a new guy? So there's some things that I just kind of sit there and I'm like, wait a minute, what? And I've had to really, really sit and like try to figure out how this could all work in this universe.
Now that you bring that up, I never really thought about how old they were. The fact that people would notice, and now I'm just like, yeah, no, that would make sense.
I have like 3 other like little things like that where I'm like, wait a minute, huh? But I won't go through the nitty gritty. But yeah, it's the most challenging aspect is I think Jack Kirby was operating at like 150 miles per hour with these huge ideas, and I tend to be a little bit more of a details girl. So I was like, what about this? Like, yeah. So
Mhm.
we'll see. We'll see if that actually matters in the writing.
Most definitely, and I do think that's a good way of putting it. That he was going at 100 miles per hour, because in a way, New Gods feels like such a creator-owned book before you had, like you mentioned, webcomics or Image or Boom or all these smaller publishers, because it's very much Jack Kirby putting his creative stamp and creating his own sandbox.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's whenever I'm describing to people for the first time like what I'm working on, and I have to do a whole spiel of, okay, do you know who Jack Kirby is? Okay, do you know who Captain America is? Okay, so you know who Stan Lee is? Okay. And then I talk about how when he was given free reign at DC, it really was this creator owned. We wish it were creator owned, but it has that feel to it, that kind of like total sprawling, like epic feel that like it's a type of writing that when I when I teach at universities or colleges, I often tell students that like the first story that you're going to write is probably not going to be good. Everyone has that story that they have like, oh yeah, it's a huge epic. It has angels and demons fighting to the end, and like you come up with it when you're 13 years old, and it's like it's just this sprawling. It's like Lord of the Rings, but like it's like 10 movies instead of 3. Um Including The Hobbit or any of those movies. But like when you're a kid, you have that huge those huge thoughts, but there's no way you can execute. Jack Kirby, when he was 50 and had drawn by that point thousands upon thousands upon thousands of comic pages, still had that motivation of like, what if I told a huge story with like angels and demons and like giant cosmic war? And he's like, yeah, I think I can do this. And he did.
Yeah, he really did with that and crafted some of the best opening pages in any comic book
Yeah.
with New Gods 1.
There was a time when the old gods died. What does it say? It was they don't say this, but there's this like slang that people say like, "Oh my god, it was so bad for her." But that's basically what he says. Like there was a time when the old gods died. It was bad for them, y'all.
It was. I forgot how he described it. It's like they died in this fiery holocaust.
Yeah. Oh, the way that Jack Kirby throws around the word Holocaust like it's going out of style. Like I love not a word you see a lot today, but he was like, "Yeah, I could sprinkle this in every 3 issues."
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's just a bit of that historical and cultural thing as well, because there was that X-Men character named Holocaust. It was like
Ah.
he's like a fiery villain. I think they changed his name to something else now, which
Probably for,
probably for the
good
best. But
reason.
I do
Yeah.
think there's again there's that so much of that world built too. It's like it's called the Fourth World. We don't know much about the first age, second age, or the third age. We're in the fourth age, and I think that's just so fascinating.
Yeah, it's like the pinnacle of writing in medias res. He's like, "Oh yeah, there's like 3 other worlds before this, but we're in the 4th world." Just huge massive swings that he takes with every world building decision.
Exactly with that, and kind of switching gears now to your boy, your emo prince, Orion, which a character I fully agree with. People get wrong about.
Yeah, don't get me started on Orion. I'm glad. I had no idea that there was a journalist from I think Popverse or in the
Yes, that's
crowd.
it.
Yeah, well, we were talking about that. I was just waxing poetic about Orion and how I feel like I think I don't know if it's in the article, but I did say like Edward Cullen, eat your heart out. I just think like an Orion for like 2025 or 2026 should be a character who is, like canonically, he is a character who is just like completely like just ridden with torment. Just kind of holding his face and saying like, "I'm of 2 worlds." Like, how can this be the face of Apokolips? Like, it's so amazing that all of this isn't canon, and to update that you don't really need to do much because I really like to use to pick out quotes from the original comics wholesale and drop them in, and they work, and they do make him into an emo prince. And anybody who argues with me, I'll just point to the original text. I'm like, look, he said this. He said that he was like filled with torment. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. I fully agree. He is definitely the guy listening to Nine Inch Nails to Joy Division.
Yeah.
Just like, what is my life? What am I doing with this? Am I a mistake? Am I going to be like my dad?
Oh my, like, "I'm not like you, dad." Like, it doesn't get more angsty and teenage than that. To kind of, like, make sure that he's not just a purely emo, angsty teenager, it's about writing him as a warrior too. He has a great sense of nobility, a great sense of justice, great sense of honor that, like, it's it's fun. Like I remember in my first drafts of writing Orion, he felt too much like a teen. And then when I was kind of working on some of the first scenes, when especially when he's interacting with Highfather, it's about him. You know, Highfather. Some people would say look at Highfather and Orion as like coworkers. They don't. There's not a lot of love between them. But I think that Highfather understands that. I think he does love Orion. I think he does see Orion as his son, and I think that um, Orion does have a lot of tremendous respect for Highfather. But after learning about the pact, after learning that he was like switched at birth, I can see him being um, being maybe not cold, but just a little bit more removed. But yeah, I had to explain why, like, because we have this wonderful scene in I forget what issues that issue New Gods 7 or 8 or something where um we see Orion as a child, this bald headed redhead kid with crazy eyebrows, wearing like a clown suit. And he has a knife. Oh my god. He's that meme. He's like, "What do
What
you
do you
have
have
there,
there?
Orion? A knife." No.
No.
And he sees Highfather for the first time and he's like, "Oh my god, are you my dad? You must be my dad. You're ignoring me. You've always ignored me." And he like tries to kill Highfather. And Highfather says, "Well, please don't do that and drop the knife. I like if you trust me, like I'll take care of you." I don't know how Orion goes through his teenage and young adult years on New Genesis without constantly thinking about that first moment. Like, and like, does Light Ray ever ask him about that? Like, how, like, you say, "Hey, you're new here. You're new to the playground. Um, A, why are you bald? And B, like, why is Highfather your dad?" Like, I have a lot. I have so many questions. Like, does Light Ray remember the war? He was alive. If he had anyway, I could go on.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's also before probably Orion even has his mother box to help
Yeah.
control his appearance.
Yeah. And so that's another question, like, which I have tried to answer in Orion, which is like, everybody builds their own mother box. We know that from seeing Scott build his in Human's Lair. When did Orion build his? So was he always like a weird looking kid? Did other people meet him when he was weird? I don't know. So yeah, I have a just endless questions that I've tried to answer, hopefully.
I believe you will, and again, I do appreciate you being on the Orion defense train with me because,
Yeah.
again, so many people just think, to put it bluntly, he's a dick.
He's not. He's really not. He's never been written. I mean, he's Jack Kirby never wrote him that way. He can get mad, but I literally wrote a whole essay on this for myself because that's the type of nerd I am, which is just that you never see Orion get angry at anything other than evil. He's not like the way Jack Kirby writes him. He's never angry unless evil is present. So he's really not like a dick. He's not like a rude person. He's usually just depressed and sad. And then when evil shows up, he kind of gets activated. And when he defeats that evil, he gets depressed and sad again. So that's his vibe. And I don't know why people don't get that.
I don't get that either. I think probably either from other media or anything post Jack Kirby.
Yeah, people could maybe look at Grant Morrison's run on JLA. I think like Orion's pretty moody in that, but if we go back to the original text,
Exactly with that. And because also, too, outside of Orion, you also included him in your DC Pride story with
yeah,
Aquaman, which was excited with that. And I know probably with editorial stuff, you can't say anything more about that, but with his inclusion, I did get a vibe.
I could say anything. I don't know.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like Orion. I mean, I think he's probably just an ally. But we'll see. Maybe editorial will like toss a letter of the alphabet at him one day. I don't know. I mean, I am full on ready to say that I ship him and Light Ray because that's like you can
It's
just
yes,
just go on my Tumblr. It's like the proof. Like
if
I'm there, but I choose not to write him that way because again I have way too much reverence for Jack Kirby or something. He's a character who I think his first preoccupation in life is defeating his father,
exactly.
and honestly, that does not look good on a Bumble profile. So I really worry about his sexuality. He is obsessed with patricide, and maybe that's the new letter in the LGBTQ alphabet. The P stands for patricide. Yeah, no, Orion is writing that story was really getting to like a lot of people are like, why is Aquaman talking to Orion? Like, why is Jackson Hyde here? But it's so obvious to me, like these two characters feel outcast for reasons other than Jackson feeling out of place, even as like a queer person. Like just that feeling othered in that way, it really made it easy to fit him into that anthology piece.
Oh, definitely with that, and I do think he is probably aromantic because he doesn't strike me as a guy interested in in romantic relationships. Because, like you said, it's patricide and fighting, and that's
Um,
it.
Actually, I'm pushing up my glasses here. He does find a wife in Hunger Dogs, which is a later comic written by Jack Kirby, Becca.
True.
And he like falls to his knees and like hugs her around the waist because he's like he feels so like overwhelmed with an emotion. Like look at me. I 2 seconds ago I was like, oh, him and Light Ray are in love, and now I'm coming back and saying, well, actually he has a wife. So I don't know what to think. I'm all over the place.
They have two hands. He has
Yeah,
two hands. It's fine.
exactly.
Well, I mean,
Maybe yeah.
even in like the original New God, you just read it. It's like they are a couple of good friends.
They are good friends. It's so great. In writing the Orion script, I just had to go through and just make sure that Light Ray and Orion call each other brother a lot because if you say bro, it's all good. So
Yeah, I mean, like with Achilles and Patroclus,
yeah,
Patroclus, they're just
yeah.
brothers. They're just friends.
In my original pitch to my editor, Jim Chadwick, I was like, and then there's Light Ray. He's the Patroclus to Orion's Achilles. And Jim was like, sounds good. And I was like, great. We all know what that means. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, yeah. And we just put our thumbs up and walked away. And I'm not sure Jim knew what I was talking about. Nah, Jim is cool. Jim knew what I was talking about.
That's good to hear with that. Yeah, no, I also love Light Ray as well because he's a himbo in a way.
Yes, yeah. Well, see,
Kind of.
careful, because I remember I respond so much to any type of New Gods content where I will say like, well, actually, in the Glory Boat issue, Light Ray showed that he does have quite a bit of tactical knowledge.
See, I said sort of. I
Yes,
didn't say
sort of.
is. Clarification, it's
I
fine
got
with
so
that.
defensive immediately.
No, it's fine. And I do have to ask, will my fave Forager be an Orion? You can't say?
Spoilers. Forager. Well, I could tell you that Forager does not make his way in just because he is such a significant character. I
Mhm.
felt really weird even using him in Barda. Like, he deserves so much stage time because he is like, honestly, if we're talking about like the three kind of like messiah characters of the fourth world, it's Scott Free, Orion, and Forager. I kid you not.
Oh no, I fully support that because outside of the original Kirby stuff, you have Cosmic Odyssey, where he essentially saves the universe.
Yeah, no, like 100%. So he's a fun character. I want to draw him more, but I tend to be a depth versus breadth person, so I like to keep things narrow and do everyone justice.
Mhm. Yet I think this has to be an interesting swing for you as a writer and artist compared to your previous work, which is so much slice of life type of aspect to go really into this heavy science fiction direction.
Yeah, it's a big change, but I hope to write my own sci-fi epic one day, so I feel like I'm learning from the absolute master here. So it's at the end of the day, it's writing scenes and making sure characters have clear motivations and wants and desires and conflicting wants and desires. So it's it's really been fun, and I've just learned so much from writing and drawing these comics.
So before we close out, what can people expect in Orion?
Um, this sounds crazy, but maybe accuracy. No, that's tough. No, I think with Orion, I think people will get an explanation and exploration of Orion's fury. I really want to explain where it comes from and why it is, in this case, a good thing. I think there's plenty of humor and shenanigans too. While also, there's some darkness in there. It's Orion is a character who, he his destiny is to battle and kill his father. He's like an inherently dark character. But because, I am the author of Check Please, which is a story about pies, there will definitely be some lighthearted, uh, dare I say, shenanigan esque moments in this graphic novel. But it won't be out for another 2 years.
And I will buy day one because I is Star for New God's comment. I jokingly say I have a strong love for Kirby. I have an obsessive love for the fourth world because I mean
Nice.
the comics. At every convention I go to, at least two of the things I get are New God related, commission wise.
Fantastic. As it should be.
Yeah. So we'll also do, I think, kind of circling the drain a bit before we actually close out. I do think it's just also allowed me kind of get back to people misunderstanding Orion because I think weirdly enough, the people who would be really big fans of Orion are going to be fans of anime and manga because he would fit
He's
right in.
He's a shounen protagonist. I'm glad you said that. No spoilers for my graphic novel. But once you reach the end of it, you're gonna be like, yo, is this just Goku? Like what? Like he's a shounen protagonist.
Yeah, exactly. He's kind of like Vegeta.
Yes.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
literally have Dragon Ball chapter 198 open in a different tab. That's where Raditz shows up. So anyway.
Oh, nice. Yes, DC. Green light. New Gods anime.
Oh my gosh. It'd be the greatest opening of all time. So
It really would. I don't know if you saw this, but this got I don't want to say unreleased, but years ago, DC did greenlight a new God show.
was
And
it with Mike
all
Mignola?
yes, and I
Yeah, I've
still
seen that.
hate that we never got that so much.
Yeah, no. It's kind of I don't think I know everything about the fourth world, but like, yeah, I've seen those sketches. They're amazing.
Yeah, especially since he drew Cosmic Odyssey and he's so Kirby esque. It's like you just did what a greenlight?
Yeah. Well,
Weird
thank you
time.
so much for this interview. Like, this was an absolute blast. I love being able to talk about new gods and the fourth world just without without any restrictions. I think we freed ourselves from the X pit. Well, you freed your I maybe I helped freed you.
You did. So, Ngozi, how can people support you? How can they follow you on social media? All that.
I am Ngoziu pretty much everywhere, Ngozi U. And yeah, just look out for my next books. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Brant.